Committee of the Whole has reconvened. Senators, what I'd like to do this morning is I'd like to have OFB walk us through how they calculated the revenues that are in Chapter 1. The administration is not here currently. They're working on a couple of things. They've asked that to reconvene at 1 o'clock, that they would be here. I will have OFB walk us through revenue. I will not close the discussion. I will leave it open. When the administration comes at 1 o'clock, we can then engage in a line by line, or if anybody wants to ask them any specific question as to any specific item on there that you want to question and challenge, you're more than welcome to. And then at that point, if anybody wants to make amendments, you may, or if there's a motion to adopt the revenue or whatever, that'll be the proposal. Is that acceptable to everybody? Okay. Thank you. I'll then turn the mic over to the Director of the Office of Finance and Budget to just walk us through the revenue projection.
Okay, half a day, Senators. Good morning. So we're going to go through, I guess, the general fund revenues first. What I'll be talking to is in line by line under Section 2 of Chapter 1, subsection A. There's under income taxes. I'll be starting with the individual income taxes. I'm sorry, with corporate income taxes. And so under the corporate income tax, the adopted level for FY17, just to give some clarity, the adopted level was 142.9 million. Currently, the Office of Finance and Budget is tracking 140.5 million for the collections in 17. The proposed executive budget request had the revenues projected at 141.8 million. The FY18 proposed for, okay, I'm sorry.
Can you start all over, and then can you just go down when you said that your corporate 152, and just so that we can hear you a lot better?
Sure.
Thank you.
Let me start over. So I'll be starting off with corporate income taxes. Is that better? Okay. So under corporate income taxes, the FY17 adopted number, just to give some comparison, was 142.9 million. The tracking is 140.5 million. The executive budget request was 141.8. We're tracking at 152. The proposal is 152.6, 152,601,412, as you can see in the bill. And the FY19 proposal is 156.5 million. And let me, if you could, let me explain how we got to our number. The revenue projection for corporate income taxes, we utilized a historical growth rate of about 8.6%. And what we did was we applied that to tracking. So we extrapolated the historical data and applied the tracking, applied the growth rate to the tracking, which yielded 152.6 million for corporate for FY18. And for FY19, what we did was we applied the same growth rate, but we applied it to a more conservative number with a baseline, which was the average of the prior 2 fiscal years. And so, I'm sorry, prior 3 fiscal years. And so what that yielded was 156.6 million, which is representative of just a 2.6% increase from 18 to 19. So there was, we took a more conservative approach from 18 to 19, given their potential projecting out further. We wanted to be a little bit more conservative, and so that's where we came up with our corporate income tax projection. Moving down to our individual income tax, which is the FY17 adopted level was 100.8 million. The FY tracking is 72.3 million, and the executive budget request was 111.4 million, which is a 54% increase over tracking. And so there's obviously a large difference. We have our FY18 proposed at 78.3, which is an 8% increase over tracking, and our FY19 proposed at 81.4 million, which is a 3.92% increase over the 18 proposed. And so if I could explain why there's such a large variance. So the fiscal 16 audited financial statements, it reflected that individual income tax revenues were not inclusive of what we call the additional child tax credit. That's the ACTC for short. And so these ACTC reimbursements are received by the government of Guam on a quarterly basis. And with those revenues, prior budgets included ACTC as a revenue source, and we included that in our projections. But with the audit coming out, reflecting that they are not added to individual income taxes, what we wanted to do was project based on how the audit is presenting it. And so with that, prior individual income tax projections, which included ACTC, which was about 19 million per year in collections for ACTC, we did not include that in the FY18 proposed and the FY19 proposed. And so the committee decided to project those not including ACTC. And so the historical growth rate for individual income tax that we've used was 8%. And so we projected based off our tracking, which was 72 million, we added our 8% growth rate, which got us to 78.3 million, which is a little less than a $6 million growth year over year. For FY19, we used that same growth rate, but again, we applied it to a different baseline, a more conservative baseline. And so the growth rate was just 3.92% between 18 and 19, 78.3 million to 81.4 million. And so that's how we came up with our individual income tax projection. Moving down for withholding taxes. Withholding taxes, the FY17 adopted amount was 264.2 million. We're tracking at a little bit less at 263 million. The executive budget request proposed it at 283.1 million. That's what was proposed. In the proposal in front of you, we have it at 281.2 million, and the FY19 is at 286.3 million. And so withholding taxes has been consistently growing over the past several years. The average historical growth rate that we applied to withholding taxes was 7%, which we applied to the average of the last 2 fiscal years as a baseline. And so that recommendation yielded a $281 million projection for FY18. For FY19, we used the same method, but we had a more conservative growth rate, which was 5%. We used the 5%, which was the average of the past 5 fiscal years. And so that's how it was a little bit more conservative. Like I said, again, from 18 to 19, we used a 5% growth rate.
Sorry, Ricky, can you
Sure.
repeat that, please?
Sure.
You used 7% to get from 17 to 18, but 5% to get from 18 to 19?
Yeah, the 7% is a 3-year growth rate that we used. For 19, we used a 5-year growth rate. Because the 5-year, keeping on the theme of being a little bit more conservative from 18 to 19, given it's further out as a projection, we used a 5-year instead of a 3.
Is that formula used for all of them?
No, this is specifically for withholding.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Does anybody have any questions on these 3 taxes? Senator Duggan.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker and Mr. Hernandez. The ACTC, which is the additional child tax credit, now is there any depiction, aside from not including the ACTC as part of the calculations for individual taxes, because it's a reimbursement program to the government of Guam for funds expended or taxes that otherwise would be assumed? So is there any particular area within the revenue base or the expense base where in fact that's incorporated?
Yeah, so let me just explain additional child tax credit. So when the government of Guam makes a payment on tax refunds, the portion of those tax refunds that include the additional child tax credit, that data is provided to the federal government, and the portion of those tax refunds paid that include ACTC gets reimbursed per federal law. And so when we receive those, that's cash that the government of Guam receives on a quarterly basis, depending on how the administration sends that information over.
So you're saying it's just more or less an offset?
An offset to tax refunds paid. And so that's why the provision for tax refunds, which would be the next item under income taxes, we felt comfortable because typically refunds that are paid are range between 140 to 145 million. When we pay 140 to 145 million and you receive 19 to 20 million back, we felt comfortable and we agreed with the administration's $125 million refund provision at 125.
And that's one of the reasons why I asked that question, just for clarity, so that as we transition to the income taxes that will be paid and the level that you've incorporated, Mr. Speaker, into this budget, that certainly our colleagues will be able to understand why in the last calendar year, the government of Guam paid out approximately $149 million in tax refunds, but yet we're still retaining the number for fiscal year 17 into fiscal year 18 budget of $125 million. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone is tracking in regards to why that number is at that particular level. Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
No?
On the withholding taxes, you said that the projection is for 7%, right? The withholding taxes, you said the projection is 7%. That's how you came up with it. Has
Yeah.
that been accurate in previous years?
For withholding taxes?
Yes.
Yeah, so we extrapolated data from prior years, and from that data, the historical growth rate we took from a 3-year growth rate was 7%.
Okay.
Yeah.
Going back to the corporate taxes, can you just, what was FY17's appropriation?
The adopted level
Or the adopted level?
was 142.9 million.
Okay, and then you're saying that the tracking is at 140.5?
OFB's tracking is at 140.5 million.
And I understand that you used a growth rate to come up with then 2018, but that's a $12 million increase in essence. Is there any, aside from the growth rate, are there any other indicators that would give us confidence to rise to that level?
Yeah, well,
economic indicators?
Well, the methodology we used, given with all the revenue items, we stuck to our methodology. It's a mixed method. We had some subjective judgment calls in terms of what growth rate to use. But we used the 8.6% growth rate applied to our tracking. So that's how we came up with the corporate tax increase.
Okay, thank you. If I may ask one more, in terms of the governor's proposal, what were they asking for?
The projection was, or the executive budget request was 141.8 million.
141 for 2018?
Yes.
Okay. Any idea of why theirs is at 141 and ours is at 152? I mean, I understand the 152, but it seems like the governor's proposal was on the more conservative track based upon what was probably collected or anticipated to be collected in 2017, right?
Yeah.
I mean, can you, I don't know what the real question is, but is there some kind of justification? If the administration is feeling that that's going to be, it should stay conservative at 141, and we're saying, well, no, we can allow for an 8% increase based upon historic trends, does that put us in any kind of position that perhaps we might be over projecting?
I won't suspect to talk for their projection, but we feel comfortable with our projection at 8.6%. I suspect that question could be directed to them when they are available.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you.
Just a follow-on question with regards to the corporate income tax. There was a question that I had posed to the Director of Revenue and Taxation, because this budget will provide for, I believe, well, he mentioned 36 additional positions, of which there will be 5 revenue agents, and I believe the number is 10 revenue officers. So as these additional personnel go out and collect, the question that was posed to the Director of Revenue and Tax was, how much traditionally has each additional personnel, revenue officer or revenue agent, been able to collect on an annualized basis? and his response was that it's on the average of anywhere from $300,000. So has that been incorporated into your revenue projection for corporate income taxes?
I think you're referring to a section later on in the bill where the bill funds certain positions, revenue officers, revenue agents, tax investigators. The projections were hoping that that included those positions to be funded, because obviously that has to be approved first, and then those positions would have to be hired. But our comfort with the projection included an understanding that those positions would be approved and would be hired and funded.
First of all, you said that that particular section approving those additional positions have yet to be adopted. And then you're saying that you're comfortable with the revenue numbers that are being provided in light of the additional positions. So what is it?
Yeah, we feel more comfortable. We're comfortable without them, but we will feel more comfortable with them, obviously, if you have more enforcement.
Because you're looking at possibly...
Excuse me, Mr. Chair, are we discussing are we going through the revenue of this, or are we discussing whether we're going to go into the other agencies and try to justify their place?
I don't believe that he's asking whether or not we're justifying. He's asking whether or not we included in our revenue projection
Mr. Chair,
the anticipation of
that's
those.
not what he's alluding to. I think that we should go through the revenue, discuss the revenue, and stay on
I'm
topic.
sorry, Mr. Speaker and good Senator. Yes, that's exactly what the question was. In anticipation of what's in the total budget presentation, which is inclusive of the hiring of revenue officers and revenue agents at the Department of Revenue Taxation. It related directly back to the question that was posed to the Director of Revenue Tax.
Yesterday,
Should you get these additional positions, would it translate into increased revenue collection for the government of Guam? The answer from the Director of Revenue Tax, Mr. Camacho, was it has averaged approximately $300,000 for every single new revenue officer hired for the department. So that's why I believe it's a very appropriate question to ask whether that consideration, granted it's not adopted yet, was incorporated as part of this number. Because if it wasn't, then the reality is we get to that section, then certainly it would reinforce the number that is being presented here. So thank you very much, Mr. Speaker, and thank you, Mr. Hernandez.
Questions?
Any other question?
Senator Estevez.
So was the answer to that question that it was not included in the estimate, any increase from these additional positions?
Yeah, we feel comfortable with our projection, with or without it. We will feel more comfortable if the positions were filled. Senator Estevez.
I just find it interesting how you can comment on an agencies and your comfortability, whether they're going to collect taxes or not.
Senator Estevez.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Hernandez, you know, I have serious concern because I hear what you're saying now, but I literally just heard you say that the revenues were based on the anticipation that those new positions would be approved by this body. And so I have serious concern that here we are talking about revenue, and just the other day we were looking to try to get through revenue and all get an approval on it, on something based on something in expenses. Now, I understand the need for rules and how we move forward in the budget process, but man, I'm at a loss for words. I can't think of any other word but shady. We're going to adopt the revenues with an anticipation that something was going to get improved in terms of expenses. I have a serious issue with that.
If I could clarify, Senator, we feel comfortable with the revenues as projected. But obviously, if there are additional positions to collect, we will feel more comfortable. But the revenues that weren't based on the anticipation of hiring, the question...
I'm sorry, say that again. The revenue...
The revenues were not...
Are not?
We feel comfortable with the projection as is, with or without the positions.
So the 152 you're showing on the corporate does not take into consideration at all that we will be hiring new tax officers.
No, because as I had mentioned, the methodology we used was to extrapolate historical data and apply that to a baseline. And so with that, we feel comfortable with our projection, If there are new positions that are hired, obviously we will feel much more comfortable, but we're confident in our projection with or without the positions.
Okay, I understand, but you can see why you caught my attention, because
Yeah, I agree.
mean, we could rewind, and you did say that there was an anticipation that this would be approved, which I think should be left out of the conversation really completely. In my opinion, with regards to trying to determine whether that 152 is an accurate number and what it's based on. Now I get it, if it's based on historical growth with the splitting the difference or splitting it in half to be more conservative FY19, I get all that. But if we're anticipating the revenues of this based on something that hasn't been approved by this body, you know, I have serious issues. So as long as we've clarified that.
Yes.
Any other senator on these three? Senator Snugstein? Anybody else? Continue.
Oh, may I?
Wait. Madam Vice Speaker?
Oh,
You had a question?
I just want one more on the same topic. Why are we not including additional revenue if we are proposing to put in more employees? Isn't that the whole basis of putting in employees?
I've been here 12 years now, and I know that we've been getting reports from Revenue and Taxation that there's 160 million that hasn't been collected, and so I asked that we put more people in to give them the ability to be able to collect more. But using historical data over the last 5 or 3 years, depending, that's how we came to the amount of increase that we're proposing. We hope that the additional people will bring in even more than what we're projecting. We understand that. But it's not been taken into account. The 10 new agents at 300,000 apiece. 300,000. I mean, that's not going to make up the difference. It's just trying to make as much collection as possible.
Thank you. Also, just because we're going to keep going through these numbers, and so just as a general philosophy or policy decision, when the governor made his projection as to revenue, was he using historical growth data? I mean, I guess I'm just trying to figure out, how do we pick 3 versus 5 years, and why did the governor come up with a different number? Besides the ACTC difference, but his growth percentage, do you know what that number is? Is it the same as yours, without the ACTC?
I believe in the past, even when you were as our legal counsel, I've asked, and the previous chair of this committee has asked the administration to please tell us what their formula or what their calculations were, and we've been asking. They've not explained to us. They just say historical data. So we're using, I mean, we have people that have been in BBMR, and so we're using the same kinds of practices that they had when they were director of BBMR. And I don't know if it's the same ones that the 5 or 3 or 7 years that the current administration is using, but they've not explained to us how they got to it. We're using our information from combined knowledge of people that have served in the Bureau and served in the Office of Finance and Budget both for decades, and trying to come up with these numbers. We can't speak for the administration of what their formula is because they haven't been willing to divulge it.
Well, I appreciate that. I hope they come here this afternoon so we can ask them also. But just as a matter of, for me personally, I would totally not be able to follow you without the spreadsheet that you use during your individual presentations with us, that PowerPoint. It's so helpful. They've done such good work. and it shows S17, 18, and 19, and the governor's request. So I don't know, for me, it's been so helpful, and I don't know if everybody has this, but otherwise, it's hard to follow this discussion with numbers without it.
Okay, we'll take a short recess and set it up. Let's break until till 1 o'clock. The administration's going to be here at 1 o'clock. We'll go through these numbers together. There's no sense in going through it twice, since somehow we can't seem to move. So we'll recess until 1 o'clock. We'll deal with it with the administration here.